Is Ben Cohen with
sure
us?
is.
Ben Cohen, he's a big-time sports reporter, Wall Street Journal. Ben, you might want to bail on this. You might not want to be affiliated with this. It's guilt by association. But welcome to the program. Author of The Hot Hand, available wherever books are sold. We'll talk about that coming up. I noticed you've written a little bit about the coronavirus. Where do you think the tipping point's going to be sports-wise with the coronavirus?
I think it's going to be the July 4th hot dog eating contest, personally. No, I do think it's coming. I mean, to me, this whole thing is a bit like watching the Titanic approach the iceberg in slow motion. Like, we know what's going to happen. We know it's going to be very painful, and yet people on the deck haven't really wrapped their minds around it yet, I don't think. I mean, the idea of playing games in empty stadiums was unrealistic not too long ago, but it's already become reality in Asia and Europe, and there's nothing really about being in the U.S. that inoculates us from this. We seem to be a few weeks behind Asia and Europe, I think, in terms of the spread of this virus, and so it would not really surprise me in the least to see extreme measures being enforced here pretty soon. I think there's a real possibility for severe disruptions at like the busiest time of the calendar for American sports.
But I also wonder about this, Ben. The NCAA is slow moving. You've got the Final Four.
They are.
The Final Four coming up in April, and I wonder if they would have the wherewithal to be the first league that would make a really dramatic decision and have these basketball games played, in front of empty arenas.
Well, I think the Final Four is not the issue. I mean, that's 100,000 people in a football stadium. But the thing about the Final Four is that it's a month away. And I think that the NBA and the NHL will probably have moved by then. It seems like they're probably going to move at some point this week. I mean, it just feels like the momentum is heading that way. So, the NCAA has to worry about first-round games first, right? I mean, so that's next week. I mean, there are conference tournaments this weekend. Vanderbilt has sent kids home and canceled classes, and yet the SEC tournament is down the street in Nashville. So the NCAA is not the most progressive body. I don't know if you were aware of that, and I think there will probably have to be some pressure from local authorities and states, and maybe even on the federal level. And I don't know what they are going to do. I mean, the idea of playing the NCAA tournament in empty arenas is very strange, right? But it's a little bit different from the NBA playoffs because these are neutral site games anyway. So there's not a home court advantage that either team has. I think it would just be weird more than anything.
I mentioned that you wrote the book, The Hot Hand. It's available online wherever books are sold. And I was fascinated by this because it was a couple of decades ago. I did a story at ESPN. It was called Getting Blue, or Getting in the Zone, as athletes call it, Getting Blue or In the Zone. And I remember talking to Dennis Eckersley, and I said, "What's that feeling like?" And he said, "I can't describe it." He goes, "I don't want to talk about it because I'll talk myself out of it." But you've written a book about really getting in the zone here, the hot hand. So explain to the audience what the initiative or the premise was behind writing this.
Yeah, so, there's really no singular definition of the hot hand, but I like to think of it as when success leads to more success. And in basketball, for example, it's always been studied in basketball. And it's when you make one shot in a row and then another, and you feel like you're going to make your next shot, right? You can't miss. You're in the zone. You're on fire. But what makes this really interesting is that a few decades ago, there was this classic study about the hot hand. And what made it a classic was the counterintuitive conclusion that there is no such thing as the hot hand. It doesn't exist. It's simply seeing patterns in randomness. It was this cognitive bias, this easily digestible example of seeing patterns in randomness. And, once that study came out, something kind of amazing happened, which is that nobody believed it. The athletes themselves, none of us, because we'd all felt the hot hand. We'd seen the hot hand for ourselves. Now, some of this has changed in recent years. There is some evidence to suggest that our intuition actually may have been right all along. But to me, the reason I was so intrigued by this was that it was a story that has genius scholars and Nobel Prize winners and NBA superstars. And it was really about something that we all thought to be true, only to be told that it wasn't, only to realize that maybe it actually was. And that was just irresistible to me as a story.
But is there such thing as home court advantage? Is that something? Is that real? Where you have somebody who wins so many games in a row at home?
Well, I think, statistically, there are clearly advantages to playing at home, right? Teams are better at home. This is a little bit different, right?
Okay.
Because we all this is sort of like personal, right? It's individual. It's not a team thing. And I think the real thing here is one of control. Like there's something amazing happens when we do feel hot, whether it's in basketball, whether it's in life. I'm sure you've felt hot behind the mic sometimes, right? There are just times when you're in a zone, and the question has always been like, is that real or is that an illusion? And I think it's something that we are still trying to figure out. I'm still thinking about it, even after spending all these years writing about it.
But you have athletes who try to put themselves in the zone. Can you physically do that?
I don't think so. In fact, I asked Steph Curry about this because in the book I write about the one night that Steph Curry was the hottest he's ever been was really a game that changed his life and the fate of the Golden State Warriors and the future of the entire NBA. And it was a game against the Knicks in 2013. The most amazing part about it is that the Knicks actually won the game. But no matter that, I asked Steph, like, is there anything that you can do to put yourself in the zone? And he says he doesn't know when it's going to happen or where it's going to happen or how it's going to happen or why it's going to happen. But once it does happen, you have to embrace it. And he did that night. He scored 54 points. He made 11 of his 13 threes. It was kind of the game that changed everything for him and for us and for, everybody who watches basketball.
What about gambling, where you feel like you're on a roll, literally on a roll, or roulette or, craps? Does it play into that as well?
Well, we think it does. Something odd happens when we walk into a casino. When we go to a basketball arena and Steph Curry makes 3 shots in a row, everybody thinks that he's going to make his 4th shot, right? That's the hot hand. When we walk into a casino and you go to a roulette wheel and the ball lands on red 3 times in a row, what research has shown is that people bet on black the next time. That's the opposite of the hot hand. It's called the gambler's fallacy. And to me, again, this is about control. When we have agency of a situation, when we are the shooters and when we're playing basketball, we think we can get hot. But when we understand that we were at the mercy of chance, we realize that we probably can't. And so the difference there is like of skilled performance and random performance. Skilled is when you can really take advantage, and random is when you probably shouldn't. And believing in the hot hand can be disastrous. It can backfire on you and burn you a little bit.
Do you know more after you've done this or less after you've done this?
That is a great question. I technically know more about the hot hand, but it's sort of made me question everything around me. So it's possible that I just spent like 3 years becoming less smart about something, which is always a great way to spend 3 years.
Give me the athlete that you would love to talk to about this.
Oh, about the hot hand. Well, it was Steph, and I did get to talk to him. We saw LeBron talk about it a few weeks ago after he made 5 threes in like 7 possessions, and he says, of course, the hot hand is real, which makes him like every other NBA player. It actually might be Klay Thompson, just because you never quite know what's going to come out of Klay Thompson's mouth. And he, I think, I wrote about Steph, but probably the guy who embodies the hot hand is his own teammate, right? Like to score 37 points in a quarter is still an insane achievement. And I've watched that YouTube clip over and over, and I know those shots are going in, and I still have no idea how he actually does it. So I would love to insert some truth serum into him and just grill Klay for an hour about what that feels like.
Ben, good luck with the book. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Dan.
That's Ben Cohen, Wall Street Journal sports reporter and author of The Hot Hand. Yeah, I remember Jordan again.